Good evening, students. Right now I'm making this video to quickly introduce you to the concept of transposition. Believe it or not, both of you have done this before in your lessons. Anytime I've asked you to take a simple melody from one of your pieces and to make it start on D, or make it start on F sharp or A, changing it from the original key, moving it up or down in position. That's what transposition is. All we're going to do today is simply transposition up or down one octave, either in the same clef, different clef, and we're also going to learn how to rewrite the melody at the same pitch in a different clef. Let's get started. At this point, just make sure that you have thoroughly read pages 11 and the first half of page 12 in your Celebrate Theory books before continuing with this video. All right, so we're going to take the first example. This one is homework exercise question 1, and they give you the following melody. It's written in 2/4 time. You don't have to write this part, it'll already be in your book. And it looks as if it's in C major, and very simply, they have this written. All right, so that's our melody. Now the question is asking us to transpose that melody up one octave into the treble clef. This one's not too tricky because we're actually staying in the same clef. So when you write your response, make sure you start off with your treble clef, and please copy down any details, especially the time signature. I'm also going to make the same number of measures so it can really feel like we have a structure and we are just filling out from that point, okay? Alrighty, so at this point, we are taking this melody and we're simply going to write it one octave higher. We're not moving it into any different keys, it's going to remain in C major. So an octave higher than middle C is going to be the C that's on the third space of the treble staff. Now we encounter our first stem direction change. Because this note is above the middle line, we have to make the stems go down and be on the left side of the note. And we're going to find this actually continues as we jump up to the high G, that's now an octave higher than it was in the original melody. The stems continue to stay down. And now just make sure that you either continue the interval pattern. If it steps up, you step up, or you can simply check to make sure that that A is now an A that's exactly an octave higher. And continue writing this out. We have F, F, E, E, D, D. Notice I put the stems after. I kind of just deal with the note heads first. And we are done. Now, we could go into a number of other exercises, but I'm going to keep our original melody in mind. This is the example that's transposed up by one octave. Now, what if we go back to the original, and what if I said I wanted us to transpose it down an octave into the bass clef? Well, let's start by writing out our bass clef first. We're going to keep it in 2/4 time, of course. And again, because we're moving down by an octave exactly, we're still going to be in C major. Let's just stencil in, obviously, for the most part, let's make sure you have a ruler for this. Penmanship does matter, but at this moment, this is what I have. Okay, so we're now taking the original, not to be confused with this one, we're taking the original middle Cs and we're moving them down an octave. Well, I'm just going to make a ghost note. We know that this would be middle C in the bass clef, right? So what we need is actually an octave lower than that C, which is this one, right? And again, now our stems actually are up again because we are below the middle line, and we're going to continue forward. This represents the original melody transposed down 1 octave into the bass clef. A way you can test if your answers are right here is that you can also play the melody, and if you've reproduced it accurately, it should sound the same except just higher or lower on the piano. If you hear any difference, it could be that you've miswrote a note. Or in the case of when we do end up transposing it in a different keys, you may have forgotten an accidental. And then finally, and that's a stem up because we're below the middle line. Great. Now again, let's go back to our original. Another question that the book may ask you is to take your original melody and rewrite it at the same pitch level but in a different clef. What this means is that we're not actually transposing. They just want us to write this exact melody in the bass clef instead. So we actually don't transpose. Write your bass clef, write your 2/4 time signature, produce your bar lines, of course. Because no matter what, we know the number of beats and measures is never going to change in a transposition exercise. So if your book says rewrite, they literally want middle C, the G above middle C, the A above middle C. So if they ask you this, believe it or not, what you're writing is going to have actually a lot of ledger lines. I have a feeling this is why the book did not make this first question a rewrite. But it offers us a good chance for some practice. This would be rewritten, not transposed, because in sound we haven't actually moved anywhere. Then our up a fifth would literally be 3 ledger lines. And you see why this probably wouldn't have been asked in the book. Good thing our stems are still down. Up to that A, look at that, wow. Well, that's a half note G. And then do that really high bass clef ledger line F to bass clef E, to middle C. As you see, this melody reproduced would be no different sounding at all than our original. This is going to have the exact same sound as our original, except it's written for bass clef or perhaps a different instrument. So let's go through this again. The original melody, the transposed up 1 octave melody using the same clef, transposed down 1 octave, and if they asked you to transpose down into the bass clef, and then rewrite at the same pitch level in the bass clef.